Hello friends and welcome back to another video. My name is Ligo and today I'm going to be trying gouache for the first time, as well as giving you guys a review of the Pēbēo gouache paint. This is a cheap gouache paint that I picked up from the kids section in the store. I like using cheap paint when I'm trying to use a new medium. That way I can use them without feeling any pressure. So this set comes with 10 tubes, each one having 10 millimeters of paint in it. And I personally think that the tubes are quite small. I don't know how long it will last me. I think it depends on how much I paint with it. Especially the fact that we use gouache like sometimes straight up from the tube, not as watered down as watercolors. So keep that in mind if you wanna buy these. On the tube it also says gouache tempera, and I have no idea what tempera actually means. I believe that it's a gouache-like medium. I don't know, please tell me the answer in the comments below. So now let's see actually what the paint looks like from the inside. Starting with ivory black, then burnt sienna. And as you can see, this paint was too watery or too runny. It just got all over the place for some reason. Primary blue, emerald green, ultramarine blue, primary red, carmine, bright orange, primary yellow, and finally permanent white. And as you can see, white is much thicker than the rest of the paints. Now let's move to swatching the colors, and I'm going to be using Dollar Brownie watercolor paper. And for the brush, I'm using a round flat synthetic brush that I had from ages ago. At first, I start by using the gouache straight out of the tube without any water, and as you can see, it's very hard to get the gouache onto the paper if it doesn't have any water. And I add water progressively as I move to the end of the swatch. As you can see, just by dabbing my brush into the water, the gouache becomes so creamy, and when I add way too much water, the gouache doesn't really sink into the paper, it does actually float. So I struggled a bit with the amount of water it needed. When gouache dries, it becomes matte and brighter than the wet gouache. And knowing the perfect amount of water you need to add to the gouache in order to paint with it is very crucial. And as you can see, I was really struggling with making a smooth transition between opaque gouache and a more watery gouache. I didn't really know the right amount of water to add to my paint, but I wasn't really stressing myself over it because this is my first time trying it, and I know that I get better with practice. As for the color palette that comes in this set, I didn't really like it personally. Such as emerald green, I thought that it was very easy to mix it just by using yellow and blue. Also, carmine and primary red were very similar. Also, one thing that I noticed was that the colors were a bit cold toned. I'm not an expert, so I'm not really sure about this, but even the red and yellow colors don't seem to be warm to me in this set. But again, this is just a kid's gouache set. I don't know why I'm being too precise. And it's also my first time using gouache, so I shouldn't be acting like an expert. As for the white paint, I decided to lay down some black paint first, let it dry, and then apply white over it. And as you can see, it does apply very opaquely, but then when you add water, the gouache underneath reactivates. And this is where gouache and watercolors differ from each other, because with watercolor you can glaze over opaque paint with a much watered down paint, but with gouache you always have to start with a watered down layer first, and then you add the opaque one on top, because opaque paint does reactivate very easily. Now let's move on to actually practicing controlling water. I've seen this exercise in Meryam Tillson's video where she suggests you to use these squares in order to move from very opaque paint to very transparent one by adding water slowly. This way you're going to learn how to get the right consistency for your painting. And this is something that I struggled with while using gouache because it made me waste so much paint, because when I add too much water, then I need to add more paint in order to get the right consistency, and then when I add too much paint, I need to add more water, and it's just a waste of paint. And that's why I'd suggest you add just a little bit of water at a time. Another thing that I wanted to practice with gouache is blending two different colors. So I used primary blue and primary red in order to get purple. And also I added white. I've seen this in a YouTube video, but I can't really remember from which artist. I think that adding the white makes the paint more thicker and makes the transition more smooth. But I really don't know the science behind it, so explain to me in the comments. So I added a little bit of water for both the paints and a little bit of white. Then I mixed both the colors in my palette first. Then I kept going back and forth between the two colors in my paper. One mistake that you're gonna see me make a lot is jumping straight from the blues to the pink. So the technique that I'm using is starting from one side of the swatch, then moving slowly to the other side. And I noticed that adding too much water will make you lift the paint. So rather than adding water, just add more paint. I'm not really happy with my blending here, but again, I will learn how to blend with more practice. Now for the real fun part. Let's do my first ever gouache painting. I wanted to do something really simple, such as a still life study. So I used the very first image that popped in my Pinterest feed of a still life picture, and it was this image of a green bottle with two pears. And I started painting with a very transparent wash, just like watercolors. And one mistake that I made is not think about the values of the picture before starting painting. So I was just guessing and trying my best to match the picture. And the thing that I really struggled with is matching the colors. I really didn't know which paint to mix in order to get the right green or the right yellow. So I was just really going back and forth and using a water-like method, which is glazing, in order to get the right colors that I wanted. Another thing was getting really dark colors for the shadow of for the bottle. I didn't know the right colors to mix in order to get my most darkest shades. And the same goes for the bright colors. So the leaf or the petals or the vine was very reflective of the light source, and I didn't know how to convey that with this paint. Was I supposed to add more white? Was I supposed to add a much dull green? I didn't really know. And this was the best that I could do in that moment. And I was, to be honest, very happy with my very first gouache painting. One major thing that I learned is to think before you paint. And the fact that I actually need to practice mixing colors. But before that, let me guys just show you that I forgot to tell you that this case actually comes off, and that you can actually use it as a palette for your painting. And it's very convenient, but I would suggest to have a neutral color underneath because it's clear. But now let's move on to actually mixing my own colors using the only 3 primary colors and adding to that black and white. I actually just followed a Sarah Byrne Studio video where she explained how to make color charts, and she actually just used these 3 colors including black and white in order to make 25 colors. So first you just lay down your primary colors in this diagonal order, and you just mix the color with the color that is underneath it. As you can see, I really don't know how to explain this, but I think it's very obvious from the video. And again, you should check her video for more info. And I also messed up here where I mixed purple with white instead of red with white. So this color chart helps you get the secondary color as well as some dark and light colors you get from mixing the primary colors with white and black. Interestingly, when you mix yellow with black, you get olive green. Generally speaking, my favorite colors are the ones you get when you mix primary colors with black. They are just so deep and beautiful. Now let's move on to the next level, which is mixing colors for the skin. And for this one, I watched the video by HamRib art, and she only uses primary colors in order to get all the skin tones. So only using primary colors, you start by your undertone. As you might know, there are people with cold undertone skin or warm skin, or with green undertone skin or neutral skin. And again, you should check her video to get a really good explanation, because I really can't explain this. But I actually failed at creating human undertones. As you might see, it was complete chaos, and most of these colors don't even look like a human color. And I think it will be better for me to practice from reference, especially for the dark skin, because once you add white, it's very easy to get light skin. And for my next attempt, I tried to do a portrait study to actually try and apply the knowledge that I got from mixing the charts. I choose to do a portrait of Sophia Lidis. I didn't spend time at the sketching, so the proportions are a bit off, because I was just too excited to start painting my very first gouache portrait. And of course, I used the 3 primary colors, starting with a watered down wash, and just trying my best in order to match the values and the hues. So for instance, the shadow was very purple to me, but I had to figure out a way to make it look a bit more natural. But also I didn't shy away from using bold colors, because the portrait had very saturated colors. So sometimes you will see me just using the colors straight up from the tube. One thing that I struggled with was mixing the colors in order to get a very warm tone for her skin, because in the photo, some parts of her face that hit the light, except the white parts of course, are very orangey. On the other hand, the parts that were on the shadow had a very purple hue to them. So this again follows the rule that shadows are cooler and the light source is warm. One thing that I struggled with while painting this, I didn't have a smooth workflow. I keep jumping from one part to the other. So I would start with the eyes and then struggle with the eyes and move on to the cheeks, and then struggle with the cheeks and move on to the neck. And it's the same thing that I said in my previous painting, which is I don't think before I start painting. And it results in a very chaotic and stressing painting session. In order to get very dark shadows, I started using black and brown, mix it with the rest of my shadow colors. The painting was also very patchy because I kept focusing on one area at a time, so I'd go back with a wet brush just to reactivate the paint slightly in order to mix it and to blend it. While painting, I used to always be scared of using dark colors, because in contrast with the white paper, you tend to think that the dark color that you are using is really dark, but then when you lay down other colors next to it, you realize it wasn't dark enough. When I used this dark color on the dark shadow of the nose, I felt like it made the nose shape just pop. But also that actually depends on the light source, so if you have a very harsh light, you will get a very harsh shadow. I also was struggling with light. As you can see here, I was adding more white paint in order to get that harsh light reflection on her cheekbone, but I kept reactivating the painting underneath In addition to that, I didn't know how to make my highlight have like a specific shape, like the shadow. And by the end of this paint, I was getting much more lazier. As you can see, the neck looks very alien, and the hair, and as you might know if you know me, hair is my worst enemy. I've said this in previous video, and I still haven't practiced how to actually paint hair. The hair is just so overwhelming. There are just too many colors, too many directions, and so I don't spend any time on hair and I just paint it and it looks very flat. But anyways, I made a lot of mistakes while drawing this portrait, while painting it, which means that I'm gonna be learning a lot if I sit down and practice my mistakes. Especially practicing values and more light and shadow. And as you can see, I used a lot from the tubes. They are very small, so I think it's better for me to just use individual tube from now on. Thanks a lot for watching my video, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you. Bye.